It's official. NOAA has released their 2022 hurricane season outlook, and it calls for the third consecutive year with above average activity in the Atlantic basin, with 14 to 21 named storms, 6 to 10 hurricanes, and 3 to 6 major hurricanes, meaning category 3, 4, or 5 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Now, the numbers always get most of the attention, and rightfully so, but here on Weather World, we like to dig deeper, and we want to talk more about the factors that go into not just making the hurricane season outlook overall, but particularly an above-average forecast like we have once again this year. And who better to talk to than NOAA's lead forecaster for the hurricane season outlook, Matt Rosencrans. We are grateful that he is joining the program this evening. Matt, thanks for taking the time to chat with us.
Good to talk to you, Ben.
So first and foremost, can you talk about the factors that go into making the hurricane season outlook?
Yeah, so we look at statistical models, like as I mentioned, regression models, linear models, logistic regression models. We'll use analog years, analoging at a couple of different factors, such as sea surface temperatures in the main development region, sea surface temperatures in the main development region versus the rest of the global tropics. We'll look at a lot of dynamical model output. We exchange information with European Center, UK Met, GFDL, Geophysical Fluids Dynamics Laboratory, and our own operational climate forecast system has specialized high-resolution runs that we run every April and July.
Let's talk more specifically now about this year. What are some of these driving factors that went into that above-average hurricane season outlook for 2022?
Well, from the publicly available data sources, the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, the oceanic component is positive. West African monsoon, the wind flow there is looking a bit active as well. And we're in a La Nina and forecast to stay in a La Nina through the summer.
Okay, we're going to come back to the La Nina in a moment, but first I want to touch on this other big driver that you've just mentioned and these oscillations going on in the Atlantic basin. We've talked in prior discussions about how this is referred to as the high activity era by NOAA in the Atlantic basin. Can you talk more about what that high activity era is and how long we can expect to be in it?
So what goes into the high activity era is kind of a coupled system. The oceanic and atmospheric and wind conditions over the Atlantic, over the Western Africa, the West African monsoon, as well as the trade winds in the Atlantic. And those periods of high activity in the historical record have lasted anywhere between 25 to 40 years. And so that's an analysis piece that goes into our modeling that helps us make our outlooks.
And now back to everyone's favorite buzzword, the ongoing La Nina. How does that factor into all of this?
The main factor that La Nina contributes to an above normal, hurricane season, the way El Nino would contribute to a below normal season, they're changing the wind shear patterns. That's the main driving factor on how it does it.
So we have this La Nina, which tends to weaken wind shear over the Atlantic. That's a favorable situation for hurricanes to form. But this year is actually going to be our third consecutive year with the La Nina. We're going for this rare triple dip, as it's being called. Does that factor into this at all as well?
Whether or not the multiple years and the triple dip La Nina would have a compounding effect, that's still something we're digging into. We've only had 7 double dip La Ninas in the past, and only 2 of them have actually ended up in a third triple dip La Nina. We only really have 2 cases out of the 70-year record.
So the high activity era stacks the deck toward more storms. The La Nina stacks the deck that way as well. Do we basically need to hold out hope for the development of an El Nino to put a pause on these high activity and hyperactive conditions in the Atlantic?
So a change in the La Nina or El Nino, the ENSO pattern, it's not the only thing that can disrupt the Atlantic hurricane season. So even during high activity eras, you can have low activity seasons, like 2014. It was not a strong El Nino, yet we had a very low amount of activity. We only had 8 named storms. The ENSO and AMO, the high activity era, they're very concentrated either in the Atlantic or in the tropical Pacific. You have changes to patterns that are in the kind of extratropical Pacific, kind of north of Hawaii, you're up near the Aleutians. And that's why NOAA gives ranges for these probabilities. Why we don't give specific numbers. It's really to try to account for that uncertainty and the kind of unforeseen parts of the Earth system that we just don't know right now.
Well, hopefully something soon disrupts these active conditions, because 30 named storms in 2020, 21 named storms last year, and now a forecast for 14 to 21 more this year. Can you talk a little bit about why it's so important to be prepared going into the hurricane season when things are still relatively quiet?
It's never too early to prepare for the hurricane season, because once the storms are forming, you may only have, 1 day or maybe up to 5 or 6 days notice when it's coming to your area. So taking the time to think about, your life, your house, your work, your possessions, your family, where they are. If you have a student that's going to be off to college, different university, where do you meet up for an impending hurricane? Especially when it can bring heavy rains and inland flooding to places, Pennsylvania, inland Pennsylvania. Understanding, where you live and how you can create a plan to respond should a hurricane be forecast to come your way and bring that inland flooding, high winds, potential power outages. The statistical analysis does show that major hurricanes are about twice as likely during a high activity era, and we do have about twice as many hurricane landfalls in high activity era years as during low activity era years. And we all know right now there's supply chain constraints in the world. So giving yourselves more time to get prepared is really key to being prepared.
So it's all about knowing your risk and having a plan in place. Matt Rosencrans, NOAA's lead forecaster for the hurricane season outlook, we really appreciate you joining us this evening.
Good to talk to you, Ben. Stay safe this hurricane season.
And we'll be back in a moment with more.